Good evening. It's Tuesday, October 10th, 5 p.m. in Washington, D.C. I'm Anya Parampil. You're watching RT America. We begin this hour amid ever-increasing tensions between the United States and the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. The U.S. is preparing for yet another round of joint military exercises with the Republic of Korea in the south. This time, the U.S. plans to send a nuclear-powered submarine armed with 154 Tomahawk missiles to the peninsula. That's according to a South Korean media outlet. Reports say the USS Michigan is slated to arrive at the port city of Busan, South Korea, this weekend. By next week, the submarine will reportedly conduct joint military drills with the USS Ronald Reagan, a U.S. aircraft carrier, simulating all-out war against the North. DPRK considers these drills to be very provocative and has offered to halt its nuclear program if the U.S. puts an end to these drills. Meanwhile, today, defense officials in South Korea say they believe special forces for the Korean People's Army conducted training exercises to practice infiltrating the South Korean-U.S. Combined Forces Command by paraglider in September. A South Korean lawmaker also accused the DPRK of deploying hackers to steal highly classified military documents, including details of a, quote, decapitation strike against the North. In other words, a plan designed by South Korea to remove North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. All this comes as the Workers' Party of Korea marked the 72nd anniversary of its founding in the North. With President Trump repeatedly threatening to destroy North Korea, Britain has now dived into the mix and is currently drawing up battle plans to help the U.S. if a war with North Korea becomes reality. With the latest, here's RT's Alex Mihailovich in Toronto.
They know full well that if the U.S. jumps into a war with North Korea, they might be one of the first ones asked to come along for the ride. And just thinking about that, the fact is that these guys have started writing up plans on how they would help the United States in a war against North Korea. Now, we know the Brits, historically speaking, have always had a pretty incredible Navy, and they still do to this day. And what they are considering and doing is adding to their arsenal with the HMS Queen Elizabeth. Now, here we got some stats on this big boat. This is an aircraft carrier, and it's brand new. It's not supposed to be put into commission until 2020. It's worth about $3.9 billion. The ship has 3,000 separate compartments, 471 cabins, 1,600 bunks, and it can hold up to 36 F-35B stealth fighter jets. That's a lot of planes with a lot of firepower. But the question is, will the U.S. even need the Brits in a situation like this? We know that the U.S. have a formidable force in the Pacific Ocean already, and whatever the Brits can do, it'd probably take a bit of time for them to get their boats out there, first of all. And second of all, the U.S. Army, or the U.S. Navy, I should say, in this case, it's pretty powerful on its own. So many British people are questioning why Britain would even get into this game, knowing full well that this really is not their battle, other than the fact that their Secretary of Defense keeps telling them that North Korea's missiles can reach London more easily than they can reach Los Angeles, since London is actually closer, geographically speaking.
Well, is it as simple as that then, Alex? The fear-mongering or the traditional allyship with the United States? Why is Britain being so hawkish when it comes to North Korea?
Well, extremely hawkish, and it seems all to be coming out of Mr. Fallon's mouth, the man that I just mentioned. And I'm going to give you a quote by him, and this is quite interesting, sort of to get the idea of where this man's mind is. Today, the nuclear dangers are intensifying from a reckless North Korea and increasingly aggressive Russia. Nuclear weapons remain the only credible way to deter the most extreme dangers, reminding any aggressor that the benefits of an attack would be vastly outweighed by the consequences. And that's the British Defense Secretary Michael Fallon saying that. Now, Michael Fallon, look, the West has a lot of reasons to be afraid of what's going on. 6 nuclear tests in recent months, a couple of missiles shot over Japan by North Korea. But the fact of the matter is you have to kind of sit back and think about, why is this going down? Kim Jong-il is not a stupid man, or Kim Jong-un, I should say. He's not a stupid man. He's looking at the situation where he saw somebody like Gaddafi go down, somebody like Saddam Hussein go down, because they didn't have deterrence. So he's trying to protect his own regime with this type of weaponry, and he's asking to negotiate. He's telling President Trump, let's talk about you guys sending all these weapons and doing these drills over in South Korea. So that's one big thing. And one thing that Mr. Fallon does not address is that China is the factor here, not the Brits, not the U.S. China is the country that's dealing most closely with North Korea. China has put up some stringent sanctions against North Korea. China can get the job done. And for some reason now, the Brits are saber-rattling as well. We also know that Mr. Fallon, though, recently has asked for more money for defense. So that could all be playing a part of this in this as well. As it sits with the Ministry of Defense in Britain, they're saying they would like to see a peaceful resolution and a diplomatic resolution to all this. And what we're seeing is, a lot of, as I mentioned, saber rattling and a lot of push for a war that really doesn't need to happen.
Well, even if the war doesn't happen, Alex, it seems all the saber rattling will keep weapons makers here and in the UK very happy. Alex Mihailovich reporting in Toronto. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
For some analysis, let's turn to Paul Kawika Martin, the Senior Director at Peace Action. Welcome, Paul. With all the escalations we've seen in recent weeks, including the unprecedented sanctions recently put in place against North Korea, is the U.S. helping the situation by deploying a submarine, more missiles, and holding these drills with South Korea?
I don't think so. I think we continue to escalate the situation. I mean, people ask, are we going to go to war with North Korea? I think we are already at war with North Korea. Not only are we on a word war between the two leaders, continuing to threaten each other with nuclear weapons that could kill hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people. But also there's probably a cyber war going on. There's no doubt that North Korea has been escalating its cyber warfare against various countries. And my guess is that the U.S. is using similar type tactics against North Korea. So we're already at war. Now, are we going to be at a war that ends up killing, what some people say, upwards of 1 million people in the Korean Peninsula if a war were to break out? That's the main question. And so how do we make sure that doesn't happen? And the only thing that solved that in the past has certainly been diplomacy, as the former speaker just said. There's only a diplomatic solution here. There is no military solution. Any military solution could bring us into World War III or into a war that's going to kill millions of people.
Right, and in a way, this entire conversation about the possibility of war kind of shows you how deterrence, at least on the North Korean side, has worked. I mean, the reason we can't escalate militarily in the way we constantly hear about in the media is because everyone seems to agree the cost would be too high because North Korea has invested so much in defending itself.
Yeah, specifically, certainly on nuclear weapons. We may have tried some other sort of strategy, though. There is the geopolitical questions that your former guest mentioned, which is, China. I mean, China would not look very favorably in any kind of military intervention by the U.S. into North Korea. So there are those have to be thought out as well. But it's clear that you should probably consider North Korea a nuclear weapon state at this point. They have shown the ability to detonate fairly significant nuclear weapons. They have decent missile technology. It's not certainly clear whether or not that technology would allow a nuclear weapon to actually survive coming in the atmosphere from an intercontinental ballistic missile, but you just have to assume that that is the case at this point. So we are now looking at war of words between two nuclear weapon states, in which the UN has just passed a treaty saying nuclear weapons should be illegal because of the humanitarian consequences of the use of nuclear weapons, which most of us can't even imagine. But we are talking about millions of deaths and the possibility of pieces of land not being able to use for long periods of time.
On the question of the constant escalating rhetoric and actions, however, the North has repeatedly said it would freeze its nuclear program if the U.S. halted drills, these joint drills they hold with South Korea on a yearly basis. What's preventing negotiations at this point?
I don't think there's anything preventing negotiations, and certainly my understanding that there are certain back channel conversations being had. It's difficult to tell exactly what the president means. We've seen presidents say various things over and over again, only to do the exact opposite. And we also know that there's disagreement within the current administration with various parts of either the State Department or even on the Department of Defense, who know that a war, certainly a nuclear war or another war, would not be good. So I think that there are certain conversations happening already, but
Washington doesn't seem willing to accept that starting point for negotiations, at least at this point. Because we're running low on time, I want to move along. We have about a minute left, and it's been reported this week the Trump administration may decertify the Iran nuclear deal. Can you explain for viewers how that might impact the situation with respect to North Korea as well?
Well, this just shows how diplomacy works. Iran was maybe 3 months away, if it so chose, to being able to make a very crude nuclear device. Because of the Iran agreement negotiated by world powers, not just the U.S., but this is a multilateral agreement, including Russia, now Iran is at least a year away, if it's so decided, and it has the highest level of verification and people monitoring their nuclear systems and the country. So that has made America and the world safer. Now Trump wants to decertify that and perhaps unravel that agreement. And what is North Korea going to think? Here's a country that we are up for our word. We said one thing, that we would do one thing, and Iran has been in compliance according to all levels of experts. And now we're going to basically renege from the deal. And so how does that make us a good actor in other negotiations, such as North Korea?
It's a good question. We'll have to see what the rest of the international community will have to say if we indeed move on with that decision here in Washington. Paul Kawika Martin, Senior Director at Peace Action, thanks a lot.